Meera had learned a long time ago that some feelings did not have a language. Grief had words. Sadness had a whole vocabulary. Poems, songs, films made entire industries out of it. But this thing she carried, this low, constant hum of anger that lived just beneath her ribs, had no name she could speak aloud without sounding ungrateful, unstable, or simply ungracious. So she carried it silently, the way she carried her house keys, always there, rarely looked at, occasionally jingling loud enough to startle her. She was 29, and by every visible measure, her life was in order. She had a steady job at a textile export firm in Ludhiana, a mother who called every evening at 7, a younger brother who had just cleared his engineering exams, and a fiancé, Arjun, who was, by all accounts, a good man. He didn't drink, he didn't raise his voice. He remembered her coffee order and her cousin's birthday. Everyone told her she was lucky. So why, some nights, did she sit on the edge of her bed with her hands clenched so tightly that her nails left crescent marks in her palms? Unable to say what was wrong. It had started small, a comment here, a joke there. Arjun's mother mentioning over dinner that a working daughter-in-law is fine for now, but once the children come, Arjun's silence in that moment, not agreement, not disagreement, just a practiced neutrality, had lodged itself somewhere in Meera's chest like a splinter too small to see but sharp enough to ache when she breathed wrong. There were other things. The way her opinions were welcomed in conversation but rarely acted upon. The way her father, decades ago, used to sigh, just sigh, nothing more, whenever she came second in class instead of first, while her brother's third-place finishes were celebrated with sweets. The way she had spent her whole life being told to adjust, to compromise, to be the bigger person, until bigger person had become a costume she wore so often she forgot what her actual size was. None of it, taken alone, was a wound. That was the maddening part. If someone had hit her, she could point to the bruise. If someone had shouted at her, she could repeat the words. But this was 1,000 paper cuts delivered so gently that naming any single one as the reason felt absurd. "Why are you upset?" people would ask, and she would search her memory for one clean answer and find only fog. So she said nothing. She smiled at Arjun's mother. She thanked her father for his guidance. She told her friends she was excited for the wedding. And at night the anger sat in her like a stone at the bottom of a well, invisible from the surface, but always there, always cold. It was her grandmother, Kamla, who first noticed. Kamla was 81, mostly blind in one eye, and spent her mornings sitting on the veranda with a string of tulsi beads moving slowly through her fingers. She did not go to the temple much anymore. Her knees would not allow it, but she prayed constantly, in the way old women do, muttering half-formed words to a god she had never needed to introduce herself to twice. One evening, Meera sat beside her grandmother on the cool stone floor, watching the sky go the color of a healing bruise, purple, orange, a deep, contused blue. Kamla did not ask, "What's wrong?" She had lived long enough to know that question rarely worked on people like Meera. Instead, she said, "Your jaw is tight again." Meera touched her own face, surprised. She hadn't realized. "You've had that jaw since you were 7, Kamla continued, still moving her beads. "The summer your father scolded you for crying when you fell off the bicycle. You didn't cry after that. Not once. Not even at your daddy's funeral. I used to think you were strong. Now I think you were just quiet." Meera's throat tightened. "I don't know what I'm even angry about, Nani. That's the stupid part. If I could name it, I could fix it, or at least explain it to someone. But it's not one thing. It's everything and nothing. How do you explain that to someone without sounding ungrateful? Everyone has been so good to me." Kamla was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something Meera would carry with her for the rest of her life. "You don't owe anyone an explanation for the anger you cannot explain. Not your mother, not Arjun, not even yourself. But you are not alone with it, Beta. God sees it. He was there in every one of those small moments you cannot name. The sigh, the silence, the joke that wasn't a joke. He counted them even when you stopped counting. You don't have to prove your pain to be believed. It is already known." Meera almost laughed, not from mockery but from something closer to disbelief that comfort could be this simple. "That's a nice thought, Nani, but it doesn't change anything. The anger is still here." "I did not say it would disappear," Kamla said. "I said it is seen. There's a difference between being cured and being witnessed. Sometimes witnessed is what you need first." That night, Meera didn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling fan, turning it slow in different circles, and she thought about her grandmother's words. He counted them even when you stopped counting. She thought of every small moment she had swallowed without chewing. The time in college when a professor called on every boy in class by name, but referred to her only as the girl in the back. The time her closest friend had gotten engaged, and Meera's mother had asked, in front of relatives, "And when is it your turn?" Not maliciously, but carelessly. The way people ask about weather. The way she had once dared, at 22, to say she wanted to move to Bangalore for a better job, and had been met with a wall of concerned faces asking who would take care of her here, as if she were furniture that needed placement rather than a person who needed a life. None of these were crimes. No court would convict anyone, but they had accumulated brick by brick into something that now sat in her chest like a locked room. And the cruelest part was that she had been taught, gently but relentlessly, that opening that door and naming what was inside would make her the villain of every story. The ungrateful daughter, the difficult fiancé, the woman who couldn't just let things go. She thought about the word explain. Everyone wanted an explanation. Explanations were currency. You paid one to be allowed your feelings. But some anger doesn't come from an event. It comes from a pattern, a shape, a decades-long echo. And patterns don't fit into single sentences. Try explaining a pattern to someone who is only willing to look at one thread at a time, and you will always sound unreasonable. Maybe that was why her grandmother's words had landed somewhere so deep. Not because they solved anything, but because, for the first time, someone had said, "You don't have to explain it for it to be real." The wedding was 2 months away. In the weeks that followed, Meera didn't have a dramatic confrontation with Arjun, or storm out of a family dinner, or deliver some cinematic speech that made everyone understand her in one blinding moment. Life rarely worked that way. Instead, something quieter shifted. She began in small ways to stop performing calm. When Arjun's mother made another comment about working daughters-in-law, Meera said evenly, "I plan to keep working after the wedding. That's not up for discussion, but I'm happy to talk about how we'll manage the household together." It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't even particularly dramatic, but it was a door opening a crack. Air moving into a room that had been sealed for years. Arjun, to his credit, noticed the shift, not with defensiveness, but with a kind of quiet attentiveness. One evening he asked her directly, "Is something bothering you? You've seemed different lately. Not bad different, just awake." Meera considered lying, the way she always had. Instead, she said, "I've been angry for a long time, Arjun. Not at any one thing, just tired of shrinking. Tired of being the reasonable one, the adjusting one, the one who doesn't make waves. I don't fully understand it myself. I can't hand you a list of grievances. It's more like weather than an event." She braced for him to look confused, or worse, dismissive. Instead, he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "You don't have to explain it perfectly for me to take it seriously. I'd rather sit with something I don't fully understand than have you go silent again." It wasn't a resolution. It was a beginning. Months later, after the wedding, after the initial chaos of new households and old expectations had settled into something more livable, Meera returned to her grandmother's veranda one evening. Kamla's hands moved slower now over her tulsi beads, but her eyes, when she looked at Meera, were as sharp as ever. "Your jaw," Kamla said, studying her. "It's different." Meera smiled and rubbed her own cheek unconsciously. "Still tight sometimes, but not always. I think I stopped waiting for permission to feel it." "Good," Kamla said simply. They sat together as the sky changed colors again. That same bruised purple fading into a gentler blue-black. Stars beginning to needle through. Meera thought about all the anger she still could not fully explain to her mother, to her in-laws, sometimes even to herself. She thought about how much of her life had been organized around making that anger legible to other people, translatable, small enough to fit into a sentence that wouldn't upset anyone. She had stopped needing that translation, not because the anger had vanished. It hadn't, not entirely. And she suspected some of it never would, the way old injuries ache before rain. But because somewhere along the way, she had come to believe her grandmother's words in a way that went beyond comfort and became something closer to a foundation, that she did not have to prove her pain in a courtroom of other people's understanding for it to be valid, that every small moment she had swallowed without chewing, the sighs, the silences, the careless questions, the doors quietly closed in her face, had been seen, even when she herself had stopped keeping count. Being witnessed, her grandmother had said, is sometimes what you need before you can be healed. Meera looked up at the darkening sky, at the first stars scattering across it like punctuation marks in a sentence too long to finish in one lifetime. And for the first time in years, the anger inside her did not feel like something shameful to hide. It felt like something that had finally been allowed to exist in daylight, unexplained, unresolved, but no longer alone. Some things, she understood now, do not need a translator. They only need a witness. And she no longer needed to explain her anger to the world in order to trust that it had always been seen. The end.